Let's start with why people are so upset over this ad.
So I think people are really upset because Gillette's target audience is men, right? And basically, they are telling men that they are bad, flawed, that they have toxic masculinity, and that they need to get rid of that. So that doesn't really make sense. If that's their core audience, why would they then put out this message to other men? I mean, it has gotten more. If you look on YouTube, for example, look at how many times it's gotten disliked versus liked.
Right. Is the problem, though, the generalization of it or the actual message it's sending? Like sort of putting this on all men at once?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's putting it on all men at once, right? Because not all men are bad. And so that's really why people are upset with this. It doesn't matter if you are liberal. It doesn't matter if you're conservative. This has angered men across the board, period, across all party lines.
Which is interesting because when I saw the ad, I got, it's more... I felt like it was more benign. I felt like it was more just like there's this larger issue that we've had throughout an entire cultural of human civilization about how men have been treating women or men have gotten away with things or boys will be boys. And I felt like this was more of just like acknowledging that there is an issue but not really telling people to fix it. It was more just kind of an open-ended response at the end.
I think they are telling people to fix it, right? If you look at sort of the beginning of the ad versus the end of it, you see these two boys, wrestling on the floor. And at first, they're just watching them. And at the end, they're like getting involved and fixing it. But who are these men? What men actually sit and watch boys beat each other up just for the fun of it? I have not met these men. Have you?
No.
So who are these fictionalized characters that advertising execs are creating to create a stereotype of men? That's my issue with it.
But do you feel like now, because of the Me Too movement and because of how we're marketing to people now, it's more difficult now to market traditionally like we used to men? They're super macho, over the top, men's razor kind of, it doesn't work as necessarily in 2019 like it would back then.
I'm not sure who they're marketing to here. I actually think they're really trying to market to women who they think are buying these razors for their husbands. So I don't think this is really an ad that is geared towards marketing to men, if you really want to know. So I think it's not that it's harder to market to men. I think men are just not being treated that great in advertising right now.
But it might not even be who the target is for the ad itself, but more of making a marketing splash, right? We're talking about this. It's a big story.
Right, exactly.
Just like the Nike Kaepernick ad. It was free marketing, essentially, that they got because of how many media outlets were talking about it.
Yeah, but they also alienated a core part of their user base in doing that. Nike did the same exact thing with Kaepernick.
But
right?
we did see their stock soar as a result of
yeah.
that. They did good in their earnings numbers.
But you had the boycott Nike.
Yeah, they did have a boycott Nike. I mean, we're not necessarily getting to that level with the Gillette situation here, but is it now we're starting to see brands that want to take on this larger image, whether people agree with it or not, is it now we're kind of in this realm of, because everything's so hyper-politicized, brands now want to take a stand on particular issues that they want to talk about?
So I think it's a really great question, and honestly, I think it's reckless advertising at this point. Because I think that you have a lot of people that are jumping on top of these different movements at the time when it's hot, but it doesn't necessarily make sense. If you look at a company like Gillette, this actually doesn't make sense. They've actually been telling men to be macho, right, this entire time. But now because this is a hot movement, they want to jump on that and get on that bandwagon. But it doesn't actually align with their core brand values and the messages that they put out for years to macho men and telling them to be more macho. So now they're changing their tune on it because of the time.
So your issue is more with making this 180 switch in a sense of we're just totally changing our message, trying to jump on the bandwagon of the Me Too movement and that sort of thing. But younger audiences, younger demographics, millennials, sort of require brands to take a stance now on social issues in a sense. Is there a right way to do that while still being authentic and without changing your mind in a sense of what your brand is about?
Sure. I think there is a right way to do it, and I think that if there's a company and you want to get behind a message that makes sense because it's who you've always been and in alignment with your corporate brand values, I can totally get behind that. But I don't think that I think there's a wrong way to do it where you're just sort of changing what you think because of what's hot right now in the time. So it has to be in alignment with who you've always been as a company.
But to that point, and I think that's an interesting argument, I mean, now with direct-to-consumer offerings like the Harry's out there. Now all of a sudden Gillette is competing with people they probably didn't think they were having to compete with when the company first started. And as you mentioned, when us millennials are becoming more brand focused about the larger social mission, it becomes a part for somebody like Gillette. It's like if we don't either make a big issue or we do something to take on our bigger competitors, we're going to get left in the dust as a result of that.
Yes, but here's the problem. The marketing to millennials is entirely different to the marketing to baby boomers and the 50-plus crowd, right? So, you have to decide who is your audience. And the problem is a company like Gillette, they have a very large audience of men that encompasses baby boomers as well as millennials. So something like this is alienating a core group of the older audience for them. Are they okay with it? Are they saying that millennials are that much more profitable for them right now that they will risk losing all of that other?
So for the larger, I guess, incumbent brands like a Gillette, do you think they should then just stay away from taking a strong stance on whatever it may be and leave that to the direct-to-consumer, the startup, the digitally native companies, and let that be their realm?
I think they should, but I think, honestly, they're the only ones that actually can do this because startups cannot even take a risk like this, right? So the onus of doing any of this stuff, a startup, this is too risky for a startup.
But startups will, from the get-go, have particular stances on things and not on purpose alienate users, but really decide our very specific target person is this higher income urban millennial, for example. But is that something that these larger brands just can't even think about doing? They have to have a message that applies really broadly to everybody.
They do. So I agree with you that they have to have a larger message, but I also think they can take more risks in terms of advertising, and they have larger agencies behind it, and they can play around with it a little bit more. However, this is what I really think. If they want to take these risks, then take them across the board. I can't imagine Procter & Gamble taking a gamble like this and putting out an ad that is targeted towards women, towards a feminine product they are selling, and saying, women will be women, and also putting women down in the process. Where is that ad? I don't see it.
But how do they come back from slowing sales and losing market share to these smaller companies if not doing something bold?
I think there's a way to do something bold without alienating
what should Gillette do then? What would be the right move? Like maybe to come back from this, what would be the right next move for Gillette?
Well, so I don't think, what's interesting is I don't think Gillette thinks that they need to come back from it. That's what's even more fascinating. Even if they're boycott Gillette, even if it's trending on Twitter, all of these things, I still think they're sticking behind what they did, even though everyone wants to move over to Dollar Shave Club and all of these other things. So they're going to stand behind this. I'm not sure what they can do because they don't think they did anything wrong.
Do you feel like, though, most people would assume that there is, in the height of the Me Too movement, whether you agree with all of the philosophies behind the Me Too movement or not, there is a larger conversation that needs to be had about women, about masculinity, all that stuff that they kind of just brushed upon this issue without diving into it too much. I feel like when I watch the ad, I get the message, but I don't feel like they're taking this massive stance of saying every single man on the planet is a terrible, horrible, rapist, horrible person. I get this idea of men need to be more affectionate, need to be more, they're trying to set an example for their younger sons is what I was really getting from the message. Not necessarily that all men are bad.
I feel like it's also a highly political message, right? And it lends itself into this war on masculinity and toxic masculinity and what that really means. And so do you really want that from someone you're buying a razor from? Like, is that what you want? Or do you just want to buy a razor? Do you just want to buy a box of Cheerios? Do you just want to buy a pair of shoes?
But I'm almost curious now if we're in a moment now where brands feel like they, whether they want to or not, have to take some sort of big message now just to compete with all the other ones. I mean, you're right, this is going to drive other people maybe who didn't like the message to Dollar Shave Club, to Harry's, all the like. But the worry is maybe if brands don't take a larger message on something, even if it's something like this that they might view, in your words, as not that big of a deal, then they'd be left in the dust with all these other ones that are taking a bigger social stance.
Okay, so I understand that line of reasoning, but at the end of the day, what are they actually doing? What's the call to action in this campaign? How are they changing this, other than the ad and what they're saying? Like, is that enough? I don't see that as enough, right? So where's the conversation going beyond this ad? Are they putting thought leaders in place to keep this conversation going? Or does it live and die with this commercial?
I mean, to me, because we're talking about this so much already, I feel like it is starting a conversation.
Oh, right.
Because we are having this conversation.
And also, at the end of the day, just like with the Kaepernick situation, Nike and Procter & Gamble wins at the result because their stock then does well, and then people keep talking about it, and they're getting free advertising as a result of it, whether they wanted the ad to have an intended consequence or not.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that not all publicity is good publicity. So.
All right, we'll leave it at that then. Kris and Ruby is the president of Ruby Media Group. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.